Welcome to the Village Board work session. Today is Monday, January 24. We have four members of the board, me, David, Michael, and Paul. Nicole is absent tonight, not feeling well. So first up on our agenda is welcome Rich Williams from Insite Engineering regarding the Manville Road Corridor Improvement Project. Welcome, Rich Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I figured tonight I would give the board an update as to where we are. We've recently bid the project and received bids back. But before I get into the bids, I thought for members of the public who may be watching, as well as for the board, I would just give a very high level recap of what the project is and what we're proposing to do. So I'm just going to share my screen. For the benefit of the board, we are talking about doing a series of improvements between Grant Street, Memorial Plaza, and Tompkins Avenue along the Manville Road corridor. This is a project that goes well back into the village's history, all the way back to 2007. Got reinvigorated in 2012 and then reinvigorated again in 2017. All tied to the fact that this project is primarily being funded through a locally administered federal aid project. That means federal dollars are flowing through the New York State DOT down to the village in order to construct these improvements. The federal aid portion of the funding is $1.5 million, and the village has also recently secured additional funding from New York State DOT for just over $100,000. So there's $1.6 million in funding coming for these improvements. And the idea was to create a safer pedestrian area along the Manville Road corridor. That is a critical component of receiving the funding. And what that really allowed the village to do was to eliminate the slip lane and create a park area for the future. Although what's being considered right now is a temporary parking lot. So again, we're now at the intersection of Memorial Plaza and Manville Road. As I just mentioned, one of the first improvements that's going to happen is the elimination of the slip lane. In order to do that, we have to install a new traffic signal at the intersection of Grant Street and Manville Road. While we're doing that, we also have to upgrade all the crosswalks, drop curbs, and ramps to make them compliant with current ADA standards. Anything in dark gray on this rendering is where the sidewalks are going to be reconstructed. We were originally going to reconstruct all of the sidewalks through the corridor. One of the things we did in an effort to bring the budget back down, and I'll talk about budgets in a little bit, was we evaluated the existing sidewalk sections for compliance with ADA, and where we could, we left them in place. Another part of the project is we're going to have two raised medians. These will be mountable curbs. We coordinated those, the curb layouts and the medians with the local fire department. This was part of numerous stakeholder meetings that we had throughout the project design process. We are also going to be straightening out the existing crosswalks and making them shorter and safer for pedestrians. One, using bump outs in order to install ADA compliant drop curbs and ramps. And what those bump outs will do will calm traffic as well as allow these crosswalks to be straighter and shorter. One of the items that came up during the project review with New York State DOT is the fact that there is under their terminology, a single traffic light, although it has two strands at the intersection of Washington Avenue, Wheeler, and Manville Road. As I'm sure the board is more than familiar with, you have a full traffic light here at Washington Avenue and Manville, but then there's also a second strand of lights at Wheeler Avenue. The New York State DOT considers this a single traffic light, and they also consider it a non-standard installation because of the proximity between the two sets of strands. As part of this project and late into this project design, they required us to eliminate that strand of lights, the one at Wheeler and Manville. Just to refresh the board, we pushed back very hard, both technically and politically, and the New York State DOT was unyielding. So as part of this project, we are going to be eliminating the strand of lights at Wheeler and Manville.
And just for historical reference, they put the lights up 25 years ago. So
And that was all brought up in the discussions. And as I said, we fought very hard to try and keep this strand, and it was a non-starter with DOT. But that's the project in a very brief nutshell. We went to bid in late November, early December. We did get 5 bids back, and the great news is the low bidder was very close to our engineer's estimate. So we had worked with the village on some original pricing back in 2012, which was used to apply for the grants. When the project got reinvigorated because the funding came through in 2017, 18, we revisited those budgets, and they were considerably higher than the 2012 budgets. Our engineer's estimate put the construction. Now we have to be careful when we talk about the budgets for this project. There's really 2 pieces. There's the construction side, and then there's the construction oversight side. We're just talking about construction at the moment. That's what the bids came back for. On the construction side, our engineer's estimate was at 1.909, and the low bidder was $34,000 lower than our estimate. So very close at 1.875. The other bids that we received were 1.99, 2.17, 2.35, and the high bidder was 3.37. If the board recalls, we did recommend and we did bring in a construction cost estimator throughout the process, in part because there was a lot of volatility in the construction industry. It was exacerbated by COVID and material shortages. Their numbers did come in higher than our engineer's estimate. But the good news is ultimately, our number was pretty tight to what the actual bid came in at. So, I think we did pretty good in going out to bid and timing the time of year we went out to bid. With respect to the difference between construction and construction oversight, the board and the village does also have to pay, in addition to the construction, for the New York State DOT required construction oversight. This requires full-time inspection anytime work is occurring within the state right-of-way. It requires all the New York State DOT required reporting, all the material testing. Based on the DOT regulations, we couldn't have the contractor pay for the material testing. The village has to hire the inspector independently. So we have to account for that, and ultimately the project budgeting. So we have provided budgets to the village for construction oversight, inspection, testing, DOT required permitting in the past. But I just want to remind everybody that the bid of 1.875 does not include those numbers. So our next steps, much like everything else in this locally administered federal aid project, there are many steps to take one step forward. Our next step forward is to try and get a proceed to construction. In order to get there, we have a series of checklists and responsibility checks that we have to do on the low bidder. The low bid came in from PCI Industries. What we have to do is we also have to complete the New York State DOT required bid analysis, which we are close to completing. That requires us to analyze any line item. And remember, this is a unit price contract, so there are a lot of line items in this contract. Any line item where the low bidder's price differed from our engineer's estimate by more than 25%, we have to take a look at, recheck the quantities, make sure that, for instance, the low bidder's price was at least in line with the other bidders. It doesn't seem like there's any anomaly. If the required bid analysis checks out, we submit that to New York State DOT. They approve it. And once they approve it, we are then able to go talk to the low bidder and let them know that officially that they are the low bidder and begin to collect paperwork from them. Beyond the collection of paperwork and notification of low bidder, the New York State DOT really limits the conversations we're allowed to have with the low bidder. But once we let them know and they start to submit paperwork, the New York State DOT then has to review their paperwork. What do I mean by paperwork? It really has to do with the contractors submitting all their DBE, MBE, WBE, subcontractors, and goals and how they're meeting all the goals for this project. That all has to be entered into the New York State DOT's Equitable Business Opportunities Portal, or EBO portal. Now, in order for the contractor to enter things into the EBO portal, the village has to set the project up. In other words, the village has to get a login on the EBO portal. in order to get a login on the EBO portal, we actually need a resolution from this board authorizing, I assume it would be Eric. He has been designated this individual throughout the entire process to date, the RLO or responsible local official. So we complete the bid analysis, DOT approves it. At the same time, Eric sets us up on the EBO website. Then the contractor goes and enters all their paperwork. Once that's done and DOT approves the contractor's online submittal of their paperwork, we can officially submit an award package. Once the award package is approved, we will then receive that, proceed to construction. I'm sorry for having to talk to you about all those steps. There's a lot in there, but that is where we're headed. So
what's the realistic estimate for how long it takes to jump through all those hoops?
We want to try and complete it in 45 days because there is a state law that says the low bidder can remove their bid after 45 days with no penalty. My experience and others who have done projects like this, it typically takes a little longer. But once the bid analysis is complete and we can open the line of communication to the low bidder, we can at least be talking to them. DOT finds that a lot of times it's the low bidder's paperwork on the EBO website or the EBO portal that holds things up. So we don't fully control the entire process to get to that proceeded construction.
Okay. So your bid analysis is very nearly done, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
I would expect that I'm going to complete the bid analysis in the next day or two. We'll send it to the village just to take a look at. I'll send it to Eric. And then just so that the village can see it, and then we'll submit it to DOT hopefully this week.
So in some way back when we applied for this grant a long time ago, the estimate was $1.5 million construction, 750,000 in village contribution for a total of 2.25 million. It sounds like we're not fantastically different from that. Is that true?
The construction budget's a little higher.
Right.
The construction oversight budgets we've actually held to work with the village. So, yeah, you are pretty close to that.
Okay, so that's really good news.
That is fantastic. It's unheard. In the words of DOT, it is unheard of these days.
Okay.
So, Rich, thank you so much. I have a couple, I think quick questions. One is about the war memorials themselves and the flagpoles during the construction process. How do they are they moved in any way, or are they preserved just right where they are, do you think?
Off the top of my head, I believe we are taking the flagpoles down, but the rest of the monuments are remain in place, obviously, and would be protected through construction. The contractor cannot damage those. Mm-hmm. There is tree removal around the monuments that occurs, which the village is going to undertake prior to construction. And then there is a retaining wall that gets constructed around the downhill side of those monuments. So there is disturbance in and around the monuments, but the monuments themselves, the upper portion, should not need to be touched. And any damage to them, the contractor would be responsible for fixing.
And Rich, the envisioned ultimate location for those is moved slightly when the civic space we had talked about is potentially realized. Is there any reason to think that piece of it should happen up front?
No, we'd spent a bunch of time talking about that and when things should happen. And the way we're going to set up the temporary parking lot, maintain access for the farmers market, have that temporary parking lot work with the bollards that are part of the permanent project.
Yes.
If you recall, the police department had requested removable bollards.
Yes, I do.
I think it makes sense to leave the monuments where they are now until you do have a final civic space plan.
Okay. So, I mean, what folks need to realize, and thank you for bringing it up, Michael, is that obviously the war monuments are very important to us, and our envisioned final resolution of all of these changes puts them in a much more honorific position. In the near term, they will lose a bit of their context. Fair to say.
I think that sounds exactly right. I think we want to, manage public perceptions of what's happening when there's a disruption to that area.
No doubt.
We don't want to have any surprises.
Right.
With that. My second question is about the process of the Manville Road project for this particular bid. Do they specify like a workflow? Do they start at one end and move to the other? Does it all get dug up at the same time? Or is it not that specific?
So there are some things that when we can talk to the contractor, we're going to talk to them about. We have concerns that the traffic signal at Manville and Memorial and Grant is a long lead item. So we're going to want them to be proactive. There's also a long lead time on DOT submittal processing for traffic signals. So we're going to ask them to at least begin to prepare the signal as fast as possible. The elimination of the slip lane is really the only dependent work. And what I mean by that is we obviously have to have the new signal in and the new turn lanes in before we can eliminate that slip lane.
Yeah.
A lot of the other sidewalk work and bump outs can start to occur either while we wait for the traffic signal or, simultaneously, but I can't give you a better answer than that until we actually sit down with the contractor and get their schedule. We did not dictate means and methods as far as an order of operations or flow. We wanted to give the contractor some flexibility in that. So hopefully we weren't driving bid prices up. And we're going to have to wait and see what their schedule looks like and their plan of attack is. And obviously we're going to have input on it, looking out for the village's interest, but we have to talk to them.
And then I guess I did have a third question then that was helpful. When the Wheeler light goes down, do you bag it and see what happens, or how does that work?
I believe there is a temporary period of bagging the light, but I do want to just check with our traffic consultant and confirm that.
Okay. Sounds good.
It does. Any other questions? All right, Rich.
Okay. So again, the one thing I'm not sure when the board wants to take action, or if it's on another agenda, but that resolution to designate you responsible local official for the EBO.
Yep, that's on tonight's agenda.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Good job.
Thanks,
and
Rich.
Thank you for the good news. Let's keep rolling. So, thank you.
Take care.
Okay. Next item is a discussion with Ben Maslona from Fiscal Advisors. Welcome, Ben. Ben has assisted us for quite some years in thinking out and structuring our long-term debt.
Yes, I'm trying to start my video here. Hopefully everyone can at least hear me. But it says that I do not have permission to do video. But I can just go full voice presentation if this.
Right?
What's that?
Melissa will fix that.
All
Yep,
right.
I am working on it.
There you are, Ben. We see you now.
Perfect.
You should be
All
there
right.
now. There
Good
you go.
evening.
Noreen, I'm going to unshare you for a moment so Ben can share, right?
She's going to share on my behalf, actually.
Oh, I see. So, all right. Put it back, Noreen. I bumped you accidentally.
And it's a pleasure to be speaking with the board tonight. It has been some time since I've been down to see everyone. So just as a quick refresher, our role as the village's financial advisor is to assist in areas of these types of projects when it comes time to bonding and how to best finance a project, when to finance it. In addition to that, we assist with SEC regulations and IRS compliance for all the village's outstanding bonds and notes and things of that nature. So that's kind of where I'm coming at this project from. I was talking to Eric quite often and was very pleased to see that the project came in at such strong bids. So that was good. I know there was a lot of apprehension, especially in the bidding market and what we've seen in the last 2 years. So specifically with regards to Manville Road project, I did bring just some very quick schedules, which I'll get to in a second, as far as options, as far as what the final cost of the project may be. Projects that you have outstanding have different timing. And what do I mean by that is, we're getting ready to break ground on this project, hopefully very soon, but you have other potential projects out there. We have a piece of equipment that needs to be financed in December. And then there's another project potentially in regards to the pool. And what we try to do when possible with most of our clients is combine those types of financing together into consolidated bond issue. If you can do that, it helps with not only managing costs to issue the bond, but coming to market with a single consolidated larger bond issue is generally more well received, meaning you get more attention from investors and better bids on the interest rates for bonds. So those are the types of things I'm thinking at when we're looking at financing of this potential project. Noreen, if you were to scroll down to the second page, what I have done is I had put together just a very generic presentation of what a $1.5 million, $1.75, and $2 million bond issue may look like in the marketplace. Now, what I want to make sure I discuss with the board and let you know is that when in our discussions with Eric and the timing of the project and the reliance on the grant, what came to, I guess, a thought process would be to issue a short-term financing, which would allow the village to have funds for construction and then allow time for the project to near completion. We would take out an initial financing of roughly $2.5 million, which would cover hopefully construction costs, any additional of those. And I did write it down, but I can't remember the name of it. Oh, the oversight that has to occur for the project, and then give you a little bit of cushion in case there's any unforeseen circumstances. Then in December, what our plan would be to roll this project together with your current equipment financing and finance them both at the same time. And if the pool project were ready to go, we could always do that one as well. But at least to consolidate two projects into one. So we'd issue a short-term financing, which is noted as a bond anticipation note or a BAN, issue that from, say, April of 2022 to December of 2022. At that time, the project should be far enough along, hopefully completed. I don't know the construction schedule, but then we would issue a 14-year bond at that point in time. And if you were to notice on these schedules, we have first-year interest, which is $25,000, and then 14 years of roughly equal payments thereafter. On a $1.5 million bond, which is in column 2, the payments average around $125,000 from year 2024 to 2037. On a $1.75 million bond, it's about $145,000. And on a $2 million bond, it's about $165,000. And the reason for just giving you these options is just, as I've noticed on many of the projects I've worked on, you don't really know what you're going to get into until you get into it. So we're basically covering you on the low end, which we believe, and then on the high end. Obviously, if the project comes in even lower, we wouldn't bond the full 1.5 million. We could bond any amount less. Essentially, also, what issuing the short-term financing does is it buys us time. It buys us time to get the project almost complete so that when we do finally permanently finance, we do so at the correct amount. If we were to borrow too much, the village would be paying interest expense on funds that are essentially sitting idle as interest earnings for various accounts is very small at this point in time. So I just wanted to kind of lay out our current proposed plan would be to issue short-term financing followed by a long-term financing in December. And Noreen, if you want to please scroll back up to that first page once again.
So before you go too much further, can we ask some questions about this?
Absolutely.
So you're proposing basically getting short-term financing and then at the end of this year getting long-term financing.
Correct.
And presumably the Fed is going to raise interest rates on the short term of the yield curve a couple of times in the interim. Are you assuming that the long term is not going to move, or that it's the cost of us, even though we have other capital projects that will need funding, that the cost of, paying a few months of interest is going to exceed the difference in the interest rates between now and the end of the year?
Well, a couple of things. Yes, by issuing that short-term ban, I believe that rate will come in. I have estimated at 1% on the schedule, but to be honest with you, it'll be closer to 0.5%.
Mm-hmm.
So those interest savings that we'll get in this first year by issuing a short-term versus a long-term will mitigate if the Fed does increase interest rates. Also, I have estimated, I use a bond rate around 2.10%, which currently, I looked at various indexes this morning. A 15-year bond of a AA1 rated should fetch a rate anywhere between, I would say 1.5 and 1.7%. So I have built in some cushion should the Fed raise rates in the interim. But you're right. So I have taken into account that. I've also taken into the account that if we were to go to bond now and the project were to come in higher than expected, we would then have to issue a secondary subsequent bond. And those costs of issue would be not detrimental, but they would be unneeded and just on top of the addition, the initial financing. So issuing a ban followed by a bond is considerably cheaper than issuing multiple bond issues for a particular project. So those all were thoughts that we had developed and talked about when we came up with this particular plan.
So if your analysis stays all the same, except you assume now that if we're talking about $500,000 or less in construction costs above the long-term funding, if we did that now, that could be taken out of the our general account, our surplus account. Would you still have the same conclusion? In other words, if you're not going to the long-term bond market twice for this, is it still worth it?
Yeah, I say yes, only because of the grant. Although the grant is technically absolute at this point in time, I have been involved in a lot of projects whereby when those funds are promised but not yet in hand, and then whereby we haven't even really put a shovel in the ground yet, for lack of a better term, there's just a lot that can occur either one way or the other that could prove to change our plan or could modify our plan. And I do think that the interest rate definitely plays a huge part in it. Even if the Fed were to raise rates 0.5% in the near term, we'd still be at, if you look at the last 30, 40-year history, it's still at fairly historical lows as far as capturing a really beneficial interest rate. So I think my conclusion would still be the same. Obviously, I'm not fully against going straight to the bond market. But my hope is that if we do follow the plan that we've kind of laid out and discussed with Eric, that we would be able to kind of consolidate everything together and get it all done in one larger consolidated bond issue.
And especially the pool, which at the moment we're not in a position to fully estimate, right?
Correct. I'd love all three at the same time if we could. That would be the Eric and I were talking about that earlier today, I believe. And it was like that'd be the perfect storm if we could get them all three together wrapped into a single issue. And
the 1.6 million in federal money administered by the state that comes for the Manville Road project does not come up front, right?
Correct.
So there's a cash flow issue there, right?
So even if we go directly to bond in the upcoming months, we would issue a ban and a bond at the same time because we'd need to have that short-term construction cash flow to make sure that the contractors, can continue with work.
Right.
Just my bullet points 4 and 5, I think actually talked about most of those. And the biggest con to this particular plan is a potential rising interest rate in environment, which, as I mentioned, I think a couple of things would be mitigated by capturing a lower interest rate by issuing a ban first. So I did a quick analysis, and basically interest rates would have to go up 20 basis points between April and December to offset the interest savings by issuing a ban first versus a bond. The other piece of that puzzle is that if we were to go to bond today, we would be issuing a 15-year bond. By waiting and going in December, we're actually issuing a 14-year bond. So we're shortening the term a hair. Not a giant amount, wouldn't wouldn't move the needle too much, but something to consider. We would be issuing slightly shorter term bond. And again, then the third piece of the puzzle is hopefully we can wrap the pool project into it if possible.
Right. And looming out there is a smaller piece, but this dump truck, right?
Correct. We're 100%. If we follow this methodology, 100% will bond that together with Manville.
All right. Anybody else have questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Ben. Thorough and clear as usual. Very much appreciated.
Thanks,
All right.
Bill.
Take the time. Have a good evening, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Mike's video should be coming on soon.
Right. Next up is Mike Newman coming back to talk about summer camp salaries.
There we go.
Hey, Mike, before you start, can I ask you about the lights at the Panther Club today?
Yeah, that was news to me as well. Mindy handled it as best we could in a situation that didn't seem like administration over there had any idea this was taking place. I plan to reach out tomorrow and find out what's going on, where the lack in communication was, and just reiterate to them that this is something that cannot happen, especially something, this seemed like some sort of scheduled electrical turning off the lights on the floor that we are permitted to use. And
You lost power.
they were doing electrical work and they had scheduled, I guess, to turn the lights off. I'm assuming all the electrical except for the emergency lights on the floor that we use. Administration there was just as shocked as we were. They were trying to figure it out. Mindy handled it, got kids outside, made a little game out of it, which I think the kids enjoyed.
Go, Mindy.
I am going to reach out tomorrow and see what happened and, let them know we can't have something like this happen for a program that, we've signed up to be there, and we also pay a custodial fee to be there. So we're paying, to be there as well. So hopefully I can get some answers.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So camp. So can I share my presentation again?
Please do.
Am I
Yeah, you
able
should
to-
be able to share screen, Mike.
Okay. I'm sorry. Where do I go to share my screen? I see it. Never mind. Sorry. Okay. Can you guys see that?
We can.
Okay. So I didn't change this presentation much, but let me run through it and basically propose what I think makes the most sense for us for this coming summer. Basically, I'm asking to raise the salaries for camp counselors for this year. The current rate has been $9 an hour. Teen travel was $12. The reasons: minimum wage, hard sell at $9, hard sell at $12 for college kids. We want to try to stay competitive with minimum wage. Our issue is not staying competitive necessarily with other municipalities, even though they are working to increase around us, and some are slightly above us, some are not. But the real issue is minimum wage is becoming more and more of a problem. So we want to try to get as many applicants as we can so that we can pick the best candidates to run a successful camp. I know this past year, we probably just had enough applicants. I didn't have any more applicants to choose from if we needed more staff. So that's a little bit of a fear. Granted, that was a COVID year. I'm hoping this summer things get somewhat back to normal. And I think increasing the salary will help staff feel a little bit more appreciated. So what I'm proposing, I think, which makes the most sense to me, is to increase it by $2. So our junior and senior camp counselors will go from 9 to 11, and our teen travel will go from 12 to 14. I think this is, I'd love to go higher, but in a year where we're coming back, hopefully, to a normal camp season, there's a lot of unknowns as far as registration numbers. Will people come back to camp? I'm hopeful, and I think they will. And there's also some added costs as far as supplies and trips and busing are all going up. We're seeing supplies just on our day-to-day activities going up. So I think increasing $2, getting closer to minimum wage, and then maybe we revisit this in a couple of years, makes a lot of sense. So basically, it's essentially I'm asking for, it would be a 22% increase from the 2019 salary. The fiscal year 2022 salary budget line was 159. So I'm asking for a 6% increase on that budget line from the 2022 fiscal year line to increase it to 160, which would be a 6% increase, which would cover the additional salary I believe we'll take on. Just a quick comparison, the current towns, some of the towns around us, what they're paying camp counselors, and several of them are looking to increase. And then to make up this difference, I'd like to increase the camp fees. This is a list of the camp fees from 2019. So I'd like to increase them by 5%, which would basically, if you look on this next slide, show you the increase for each registration area and how much it would be per program. I think a 5% is reasonable and not anything drastic on people where people are going to be like questioning why we're increasing, our camp fees that much. I think.
And those fees haven't changed since when?
I haven't changed since I've been here. I've been here, this will be my 9th summer, I believe. So they have not increased since then, at least then.
Yeah.
And then the other area where I think we can make up some of that increase in salary, excuse me, is reducing the bus line by 5%. We're going to do some less trips in our senior camp, which typically used to trip 3 days a week. We're going to go down to 1 trip a week with an additional trip each session. Part of that is, we're going to change our location for senior camp. Our main home will be Parkway Field. A lot of positive about being at Parkway Field. It felt more like a day camp. So that's the shift there with using the school as a rainy day site. And they'll still go on a trip every Wednesday with 1 additional trip on a Friday in one of the sessions, each of the sessions. So that's where I think, because we're doing a few less trips, we can cut that budget line by 5%. I may be able to cut it more as the years go on, but with things increasing, I'm not completely sure how much more trips are going to be, and busing. We reached out to one bus company. They gave us the indication that probably expect between $20 and $60 increase per bus for a typical trip, which was kind of less than I thought it was going to be.
So is the no trips for junior camp, what is that, a programmatic decision?
It's a so I I don't believe we did them in 2019. I'd have to double check, but it's a half a day camp. It's very hard. By the time we would swim and then try to get to a trip, it's only like 25 kids, 30 kids. It just became very difficult to get to a location and get back by a 12 o'clock dismissal. What we will do is we'll have some more entertainment, bring in some more stuff in-house to make up for a lack of a trip. But the trips just become very difficult. One, these are very young. These are kids. These are pre-K, so they're going into kindergarten that we take on these trips. So very young to take on trips. And it's just a logistical, very difficult to get there and get back and enjoy a trip. There's only so many close trips that we can go on.
Right. And first off, let me say, speaking personally, I fully support what you're proposing here, and others can comment on that. I did have another question, a little bit related, and that is, do you think, obviously, COVID numbers are looking a bit better at the moment, and have been in the schools? Do you envision, at the moment at least, from this view in January, that COVID will have a significant impact on what you're able to do and how you do it for the summer camp?
Talking with other municipalities, other people I'm close with, they're all planning as if it's going to be a fairly normal summer. So they're planning like they traditionally would. Hopefully we'll start hearing from the county end of February if there's anything specific that they're going to put in place. But I am hopeful, because I know last summer, initially they made it very difficult on teen travels up until almost the day before or the last week. They were requiring, if you were going on a trip, that you had to be the only one at the location, which is nearly impossible for most every trip, especially teen travel, that you would go on. They did end up changing that very last minute, which I know upset a lot of people because they had to scramble to do refunds because they were told they could only be the only people at a location, and that just wasn't possible. And then they changed it last minute. So I'm hopeful that they did allow trips, and with minimal restriction, that we should have a fairly normal summer.
And how does that compare to last year? Is that more potentially, assuming we get the enrollment, more kids as well as more staff?
Yeah. So last year, we initially capped our number at, I believe it was 120, and for campers, and we did a lottery system that deterred a lot of people, because they weren't sure whether they were going to get in or not. So I'm assuming a lot of people made other plans because they just weren't sure whether they were going to get into our lottery. We did our lottery system, and we ended up taking everybody. We didn't have an issue turning anyone away. We took everyone that signed up.
Right.
So I think by doing a normal registration, getting the information out, which we're planning to have out by early March, on all of our camps or trips and what we're doing, and registration a few weeks after that people will have the heads up, know what's coming, and we'll have close to normal numbers, if not better.
Okay. Anybody else have comments about what Mike has shown here? I have a few questions that veer into other matters.
Yeah, Mike. Thanks for the proposal. I'm in support of it, but I'm forgetting now what the ages are of the employees. What are the ages for the youngest employees, and then on up?
So camp counselor is the youngest. Camp counselor is the youngest staff member is 16. And teen travel, we try to have either 18 or at least 1 year of college, or 1 year removed from high school. We don't take 15-year-olds. Some camps do. the problem with taking 15-year-olds as staff is they end up going against our ratio. They're not considered staff members. They're considered campers. So they just add to our staff ratio number, which doesn't help us in the long run.
Okay, is that the same with the pool, or does the pool hire younger, under 16?
Pool, we hire 16-year-olds. We will take applications from 15-year-olds and hire if we're running short. Last year, I think we had 3 15-year-old lifeguards.
Got it. Yeah, I was curious because there's pretty limited summer work opportunities for kids under 16. I don't know if the rec department had any of those. That might help with the staffing shortages, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I understand the pros and cons of it.
Okay. So Paul, David, any thoughts about this before I veer us into another matter?
No, I think this is great. Thanks for doing the follow-up on this, Mike.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And like I said at the last meeting, I really did think that camp counselors deserve to get paid a lot more for the hard work that they do, especially because they're out there in some, extreme heat and they're out there all day. So I really appreciate that you're able to get that going and get them a better salary. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. So Mike, while we have you and we got a little bit of time here, will you want to engage a similar discussion about pool salaries?
So my thought on pool is we're potentially raising fees for the pool next year. Lifeguards, I believe when Matt, I know when Matt came on board, he did bring them up to $12. So they're currently, their base is at 12, and then they have a pay scale increase based on years with us, their age, and any other certificates that they get to make some more money. I think we're better off leaving the pool this year and tying that all into and talking about what our new fees will be and having that potential increase talk then.
And so that suggests that you're cautiously optimistic that the pool of applicants for the pool jobs will be sufficient?
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we got through a year last year and we had a solid number of staff and we were good. And that was a year where a lot of people were having a hard time finding lifeguards. So I felt pretty good. Hopefully we'll get a good return as far as coming back. We will have letters out to all lifeguard staff, hopefully by the end of the week. Me and Mindy are working on that right now. That will email them all contracts for the new year and see what we get back. If it's a good return, it makes it a lot easier on the recruiting front.
And obviously we lost the last week of the pool season with the flooding from Ida. Are we recovered from that?
Yeah. I mean, fingers crossed, every time you put everything back together and turn it on, it all goes good. But the motors have been looked at, inspected, cleaned up a little bit, and are good to go. And all the other damage and cleanup has been, inside. We replaced any damaged. It's not sheetrock, but I forget the name of what it actually is. Has been replaced around the edge of the pool, the inside. Where the water damage did take place, and any mold potential was taken care of.
Okay. So obviously, if the pool gods are willing, our intention is to run a regular season this year and then potentially close and build a new pool that would open for the next year. There are a lot of moving parts attached to that. What are you thinking, Eric? Is that still realistic, or you're not so sure?
I think it's rather realistic. I think a lot of it also hinges on whether or not the board's inclined to move forward with the flood remediation work. That then adds on an additional layer of regulatory approval. because we're connecting into the brook with the culvert system. So even with that, there's so many variables right now. You talk to folks at the county health department, their turnaround time on pool reviews is now delayed, as many can imagine why. So I think, is it a realistic timeline? Yes, but there are many variables out there that could impact that timeline.
So we had the presentation last meeting from Bob DeBruin about the ways in which we could mitigate the flood issue. And honestly, it's not so much mitigating the flood as it is diverting the water around the pool and the pool house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it seems essential to do some version of that, right? We can't build a new pool and leave it vulnerable to this kind of damage that's happened now twice in the last 5 years. If there's a regulatory approval process for that, is that separate from the process we have to go through for the pool? And if so, should we make a decision sooner rather than later and start that if it's a parallel process?
Yes. So that would, as it turns out, Nannahagan Brook is a federal waterway. So
naturally, right?
We would need to go to the.
It looks like a federal waterway, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
Cruise ships and, you know.
Yeah, I
Right.
should run some military barges right down that thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a national asset.
Right. So we would need to submit what's called a jurisdictional determination to the Army Corps of Engineers to see what their permitting process would actually be like. Hardesty and Hanover, our consulting engineers for the village, has worked closely with the Army Corps of Engineers, so it's a process they're familiar with. So we could parallel track that along with the DOH's approval, but we'll start putting all those ducks in a row once we kind of get an idea of which an idea of whether the board wants to move forward with the culvert work.
So, I mean, in the end, the idea of the culvert is simply not that in the end more water is ending up in the brook. It's just getting there without going through the pool, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, a reasonable person would think that's pretty easy to prove. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Oh, God. Well, Mike, we had a tremendously successful year last year at the pool with high enrollment, even though we had some if-then statements, not knowing what the circumstances would be with COVID precautions. So,
Yeah, which was pretty impressive with all the restrictions that we were talking about potentially doing, the potting, the reservations. We had the turnout.
How many students do we have on our scholarship program last year?
I believe at the end of the day it was 9, but I'd have to double check that.
Great.
Everyone that put in for it, we got their paperwork. If the board is planning on doing that again, that's fine. I would just, we're going to tweak it a little bit so the process of getting information is a little bit easier. It was a little difficult.
Yeah, I will definitely propose it again if obviously the board has to decide, but it would be.
and if I recall correctly, we did not expend all the money that had been assigned to it.
That's right.
You know, we had money donated as well. So
That's right.
That's great.
Something else to just think about with the pool, and I think it was talked about a little bit for next year, but it might be something we want to look at for this year too, is so currently the pool registration is done by zip code. And that was done, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago, where in the past it was village and non-village. Camp is currently village and non-village. So I bring this up because camp registration this year, while it was online last year, it looked a little different. This year, we're going to do it like normal and it'll be village and non-village, the registration system can't do it both ways. So what I'm referring to is the one way we'll have a list of addresses in our registration system that notifies, okay, this person is village, this is the rate they pay. If they don't have this address, they pay a different rate. Would you guys be open to the idea of bringing that back for this season? Village, for the pool.
So the system for the pool, even if we did that, we could, if we elected to, keep the rates the same, right? Either way, still.
Yes,
still
keep the rates the same, but the non-resident rate that we currently have would apply to some of those Mount Pleasant people that technically don't live in the village.
Right, but my point is the fact that you've gone through that the software has gone through this process of verifying whether your address is in or out of the village. We could conceivably, if the cost were $10 for a village person, it could also be $10 for a non-village person, right? We can assign whatever price we wish to for.
Oh, yes.
Right. So the reason I say that
I see what you're saying.
The reason I say that is, we've been clear in talking about the future pool and the big expense associated with building a new pool that the long-term bond for that is paid entirely by village residents and not by school district residents or residents elsewhere. So that would be the moment when it would be fair to say, hey, this new pool exists on the backs of village residents, and they should get a bit of a break in comparison to what out of village residents pay, recognizing that they're paying through their property taxes. So that was the basis for it. But we might decide that for this year, which we hope but aren't certain would be the last year of the old pool, that might not be an issue to address. I mean, we have to talk about it. But long way around saying, it seems to me that as long as we can assign the price for in village, out of village, either as the same or different, then your software setup can be the same on both sides.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Anybody else have something for Mike? All right. I thank you, sir. I think you've got ratification of your proposal for day camp.
Great.
Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Mike.
much. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. 7:59. We are just so punctual, huh? You could set your watch by this board.
We have an administrator who's officially going to be a responsible, what are we declaring you tonight? A responsible officer?
Yes.
Responsible adult, no?
Yeah.
Exactly. It takes
All
a
of those
vote. It's going to take a vote to decide whether he's actually a responsible adult.
Does my wife get a vote?
I don't think it's your wife who should get a vote. I think your 4 kids should get a vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wife gets a veto power.
All right. Back to work session, the Nannahagan flooding project. So I can bring that up, Bob's proposal. Here it is. All right. So the bottom line here was essentially all the strategies are to try to add an additional culvert to manage the water around the pool. So you all have this, but the key question that we have to confront is this, right?
Right.
Here are the various options. Here is the capacity improvement over and above where we are right now. And here is the estimated cost for those various improvements. So recognize, as Bob, I think, told us, and Eric, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, none of these proposals, including 5B, which increases our capacity to 175% of the over and above the current, would be sufficient to alone address IDA, right?
That's absolutely correct.
So that said, the bigger the capacity improvement, as you can see, the better chance you have of managing a big rainfall. Ida was what, 9 inches of rain or something? So you can see where that lands in a situation like this. But at the highest expense, $1,001.3, we could manage a rainfall of 8.4 inches, and that capacity adds 175% of what we currently have. These return period in years are based on the idea that there are 100-year storms and 50-year storms and 10-year storms. God knows if those numbers will be changed in a world of changing climate, where we've seen 200-year storms in 5 years. Anybody have any further thoughts about this? I mean, recognize essentially what this is going to do is add expense to the pool project. But it's my personal opinion that I don't see that we can do this with less than one of the bottom 3 options. Existing the options 3 or 4, although cheaper, strike me as insufficient given all that we would go through, and given the fact that we have this opportunity when building a new pool to put this new culvert between the pool and the pool house, and that opportunity would not appear again for generations.
Is there any reason you would do option 6 over 5A in that case? Are we not really just choosing between 5A and 5B?
It's just money, right?
It's $30,000, I'm saying. Like, it's a very small amount of money for another,
I would agree, right, Eric?
Yep.
I was thinking the same, that it seemed like 5A and 6 were the 2 choices I was down to.
Right. Well, so 5A is clearly a better return on a similar investment than 6. So if I'm hearing everyone correctly, it seems like we're between 5A for an estimated $890,000 and 5B at an estimated $1,001,300.
Right.
I didn't understand why 5B was more expensive if it was going to be in the area that was being dug up already. Do we have any clarity on that?
Well, 5B also includes the weir system.
Which is this system that allows us to manage to some degree the dam, right?
That's right. Yes. So there would be.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was confused. 6 is the one that's under the pool deck. Never mind.
That's right.
Never mind. I was confused.
Yeah. So and the one thing to be said about that weir system is that would be work here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that could be done in the future, independent of the culvert.
That's correct.
So, in the category of imagining we're doing the right thing now, but trying to save money, we could make the argument that we should commit to 5A with the idea that the additional, give or take, roughly $250,000 could be spent in the future on the weir. I will say, although I could be convinced that's the right way to go, there's a piece of me that thinks that we should just bite the bullet. Government has a great long history of going most of the way, but not all the way, in an effort to save money. And if that additional $250,000 is buying us the additional almost 40% capacity, I'm a little inclined to make the argument that we ought to bite the bullet.
So do we have
I agree.
and do we have any sense of the expected frequency of, different levels of rain? Because obviously we didn't get to 100-year storms in 3 years, if they're really 100-year storms.
That certainly seems logical, right? I mean, and we've had, certainly in the last 10 years, a lot of rather severe weather in comparison to the years prior to that. So recognize also that, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, the ARPA guidelines have been loosened. And this project would likely be ARPA compliant.
Oh, that's good.
That's
Oh.
correct.
So in addition to that ARPA money, what about, I mean, what are our available, who are our liaisons to find out about other federal infrastructure bills potentially coming down the line? I mean,
We've already we've already talked to our House Representatives office about that, right, Eric?
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
And
And
I mean, I'll get the lay of the land, at least as the view from Albany about what it all looks like in a couple of weeks when I go to this conference. But obviously this federal infrastructure bill its future is unclear at the moment, right? Even at the point at which some infrastructure bill is passed, it isn't crystal clear what our competitive position would be. I don't know if you read, I think largely through the efforts of Senator Schumer, a very big project was funded with federal money in Mamaroneck. Of course, Mamaroneck was overwhelmed by flooding because of their location right next to the sound. But, so, some of those things have been unlocked. We certainly are not, which is in no way to diminish the troubles folks have experienced. We're not in the circumstance Mamaroneck is, and not in the position to get those kinds of levers pulled in Washington. But if infrastructure money appears, we'll be looking to get it, that's for sure.
And I feel like we have to do it while we're doing the pool, right? Or else could lose a whole nother season if we wait.
I don't see any logic not to going as far as we reasonably can and doing it associated with the pool. What do you think, Eric? Marcy, are you?
yeah, I mean, this is the time to do it. Obviously, the options are limited in terms of what you can do when a pool's at the foot of an adjacent pond. This seems to be the most impactful and logical path forward. And the other option is to not do anything and carry on as we have been, which is, bite the bullet, try to clean up as quickly as possible. But the reality is, if this hits us in the midst of a pool season, that's, about a month out of order, which is, a third.
If this happened the 1st of July, it would be a terrible circumstance, not only losing the pool season for all of the residents that depend upon it, but likely requiring us to give back prorated monies for all the pool fees. And, in the end, our goal in building a great new pool is to have a great new pool, not to have a great new pool and a toss and turn at night every time it rains.
Right.
so how, a question about the estimated costs. I'm a little confused why 5A and 6 are so similar in estimated cost when 6 will be digging up that area anyway and excavating all of that, whereas 5A under the parking lot would be an excavation of that whole length just for the culvert. Do you know what I mean? So number 6, which goes under the pool deck, logically to me, it seems like it would be significantly cheaper because we'd be bundling it with the pool excavation.
Well, he said that we weren't bundling it explicitly when I asked him. He said that you wanted 2 separate crews, right?
It would end up as a different sub, is what he said.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
a piece of it could be common. I mean, he basically said pool guys aren't good at this and civil guys aren't good at pools, right?
Right.
But it would still be bid together, right, Eric?
That's right. It would be
Right.
one bid. Yeah.
And so certainly there'd be some synergies there. So
And yeah. And as you see, 6 is not touching the weir system at all.
Oh, yeah.
It's just building out the capacity in the culvert to eventually do the weir system.
which, would be a reasonable way to say, oh my God, it's an awful lot to digest at the moment. But, as we just heard from Ben Maslona, we continue, even with the anticipated uptick in interest rates, to be looking at long-term interest rates that are historically low. Certainly, I say that in part with no criticism of boards before us. We've certainly been in a few circumstances over the years when we said, oh God, I wish those guys had done it the right way when they did it.
Mhm.
So where do we stand? I'm inclined, pending Bob's advice, and we can dig into it a little bit further, to go for 5B, the best capacity improvement.
So overall, then we're looking at if we add the $1.1 million project here to the pool and Manville Road and the civic space, we're building up multi-million-dollar projects quite a bit right now.
Well, we are. So first off, the pool, as we've talked about in the past, has a few different revenue streams. And as a result, some piece of the cost of bonding that can be folded into our revenues from the pool, although not all of it. In the case of the Manville Road project, as we just heard, the numbers have come back favorably. And so what that may turn out to be, again, fingers crossed, is a village outlay in the neighborhood of what we years ago hoped it to be, $750,000. Fair to say, Eric?
That's right.
So that puts us in a circumstance where we know we have the $3 million for the pool on the radar screen. We're back to reality, happily, about the Manville Road project. And the piece we're adding here could, in substantial part, be funded with the ARPA money, if we chose to do it.
But okay, I hear that, but there were also other needs to do projects that were already discussed about the ARPA money, right?
We've talked about various things that could be done with them. There's been no commitment one way or another. First off, reimbursement for losses can come off the top, and then that money goes back into the general fund. Originally, it was water and sewer were automatically included. Mm-hmm. Since then, Treasury has loosened the rules. So, I'm not necessarily saying what we ought to do, other than to say we do have that pot of almost $800,000 over 2 years that could be used in various ways, including a cash contribution to a project of this kind, or conceivably a phased contribution to debt service.
Yeah, and even if we do a couple other things, we can still help this project. I think Michael does raise a good point, though, which is that it is always hard to keep all of this in your mind at the same time. And I've gone over the numbers, I've gone over the debt service numbers, looked at the bond market, all that, and it's still complex. It might be helpful, Eric, I know you had a sheet like 2 years ago showing our debt service, what was coming off.
We have it every year in our budget package. So if you still have a budget package from last year at this time, you have it, and we'll be reissuing that shortly.
Right. So what I was going to say is, given that if you added put on the expected, the thing that's hard to keep in your mind is what percentage of the pool, is going to need to be serviced by a regular income versus, additional pool revenues. That would help us understand, because my curiosity is, of course, to hope that we can sort of keep taxes flat or within the cap and still do not only this stuff, but the civic space. And that seems more possible now with the numbers we're getting back from the Manville Road project, but I'd sort of like to look at all that.
All right. So, I mean, all true. But in the end, I guess the question ultimately is whether folks view this as a nice to do, ought to do, must do. What category?
So we're talking about specifically the drainage project.
This project, right?
Yeah, I think we have to do it. There's no, it'd be foolish to invest $3 million in the pool and then,
I agree.
kill it twice in 3 years as we just have.
Right. I mean, you could make the argument that, okay, could save some money and do option 4. It's a 97% improvement. That's great. I mean, essentially, it seems to me that we need to build the best defenses we can come up with.
Yeah, and I think in the current interest rate environment, it's very hard to argue that, paying for the capacity improvement now in one construction season with cheaper money, given the uncertainty, is a bad idea.
Yeah, and it's who knows what climate change looks like, but it's certainly looking like we're going to have more severe weather in the years and decades to come, and I just think we need to buy the best defense we can come up with.
Yeah,
Michael, you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around what feels like $7 million of capital projects, and I'm just trying.
We're
when
not
you put them on, just I mean, David correctly interpreted my brain, which was that I'm having trouble keeping it all together and kind of seeing how it's paced out.
Right. So we'll give everybody back. I do not think we're talking about, in the end, a circumstance where we can probably bond $7 million. I think we're going to have to be a little more cautious than that. I wish this one didn't exist, make life a whole lot easier. Recognize this isn't the only stormwater problem we have. So, I mean, there are a whole bunch of pieces we have here. The reason I am advocating for this is, in the end, as everybody's already said, if we spend $3 million on a pool and, in some relatively short order, have it knocked out of service for a month or worse, we've failed the community.
Yes.
I remember you mentioned there's a couple different places where there is drainage issues and things like this, even right down the street.
Right down the street.
I feel like this, because we're committing so much to the pool and, doing such a big improvement in that area, that we have to protect it. It would be, I think, it would be very reckless of us not to protect something that we're investing so much into.
All right. Well, so can I suggest that we'll give everybody back a little more clarity about all the things that are already on the radar screen and the things that are possible to do. Eric, do you think that the Army Corps of Engineers approvals for this project, could be kicked off if we decided at some point in the month of February to do it and what to do? Or do you think that time is of the essence?
Well, time is certainly of the essence, but I mean, we have to do our due diligence. So it'll be what it'll be. We could look at least starting the conversation with the Army Corps of Engineer and having the initial conversations about the application and start moving that ball forward.
Right. So that seems like a great direction, right? Why don't you start that process just to sort of tee it up? Because we're going to do something, right?
Yep.
Even if it's not the full boat. No, bad metaphor. All right. So that's a plan. We'll have more to say about this when we come back in a couple of weeks. So next up, we depart our work session and go into the executive session that we already moved. Eric sent a Zoom link for that. So I'm going to shut down this meeting and we should all come back in executive session.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good night.
All right.